The morning mist still clung to the valley when Michael dismounted before the overturned cart. The silence of the woods was broken only by the faint whimpers of a child, a sound that made him clench his fists with instinctual force. There was no sign of the driver, only footprints leading away through the damp earth, a coward's trail vanishing between the trees. Michael leaned over the child and his heart constricted. The boy couldn't have been more than 8, but his body seemed even smaller, frail, with withered limbs that trembled not just from pain, but from a deeper fear. It was the fear of someone who had known rejection before he even had a name for it. "It's all right now," Michael murmured, his voice softer than he ever used on the battlefield. "I won't leave you." The child's eyes, large and frightened, locked onto his. But there was something else there, a flicker of hope the knight recognized, because he himself had searched for it for years. It was the hope of someone who still believed they could be saved, despite all evidence to the contrary. Michael lifted the boy carefully, feeling how unnervingly light he was, as if the world had tried to erase his existence piece by piece. The boy clung to his tunic with surprising strength, his small fingers digging in, as if Michael were his only anchor in a sea of abandonment. "What's your name?" Michael asked as he walked toward his horse, adjusting the child's weight in his arms. "Ethan," came the whispered reply, so quiet it was nearly lost in the wind. "Ethan, that's a strong name." Michael mounted with care, keeping the boy secure against his chest. "You know where we live, in the village of Hartfeld. There are good people there." The path to Hartfeld seemed longer than usual, each movement of the horse making Michael fear he might injure the child further. But Ethan didn't complain, not once. He just nestled closer against the knight, as if he had finally found the place where he belonged. When they reached the village, women emerged from their homes, drawn by the unusual sight. Michael knew every face, every story. They were people who understood the value of compassion because they had all needed it at some point. "He needs care," Michael said to Dame Margaret, the woman who tended to the community's sick and injured. He was abandoned on the road. Dame Margaret examined Ethan with practiced eyes, her gentle hands checking for injuries and signs of fever. "He's dehydrated and bruised, but he'll recover. You did well to bring him." Michael nodded, but a heaviness settled in his chest. He had seen abandonment before, but never of a child so small and vulnerable. It was a cruel reminder of how unforgiving the world could be to those who needed protection the most. "He can stay with me," Michael said, surprising himself with the firmness of the decision. "I have room in my home." Dame Margaret looked at him for a long moment. "That's a great responsibility, knight. A child with his limitations will need constant care." "Then it's a good thing I have nothing more important to do." The answer drew a smile from the woman. She had known Michael long enough to know that when he made a decision based on what he believed was right, nothing on earth could change his mind. Michael took Ethan to his house, a simple but solid cottage in the quietest part of the village. It was the kind of place that reflected its owner, functional, honest, without pretense. He made a makeshift bed for the boy near the hearth, using his finest blankets. "Why did you save me?" Ethan asked that night, his voice still weak but curious. Michael was stirring a simple soup, but paused to look at the boy. It was a question that deserved an honest answer. "Because you deserve to be saved. Everyone does. My father said I was a burden." The words cut Michael like a well-honed sword. He walked over and knelt beside the makeshift bed. "Your father was wrong. You are not a burden. You are a person, and people take care of each other." Ethan stared at him with those wide eyes, processing words he had likely never heard before. "What if I can't pay you back? What if I always need help? Then I will be here to help. That's how it works." That night, Michael lay awake for a long time, listening to Ethan's steady breathing and thinking about the circumstances that had brought this boy to him. There was something fated about their meeting, as if they had both been waiting for each other without knowing it. The next day, the news had already spread through the village and beyond. A knight of modest lineage had rescued an abandoned child and taken him under his protection. To some, it was a noble gesture. To others, a reckless one. To Ethan, it was simply the first time in his life that someone had chosen him. Michael didn't know it yet, but that decision would change everything. Not just for him and for Ethan, but for a young lady who was about to hear the story and feel her heart stirred by something she had never experienced. The sight of a man who chose to do the right thing simply because it was right, without expecting reward or recognition. Emma Arkwright was about to discover that true nobility had nothing to do with titles or bloodlines, but with the choices made in moments when no one else was watching, and that discovery would change her life forever. Emma held the reins tighter than necessary as she rode through the narrow streets of Hartfeld. She had insisted on coming alone, against her father's protests, claiming a charitable visit didn't require the usual pomp that followed the Arkwright family. The truth was, she needed to see for herself the knight who had rescued an abandoned child. The story had reached her through the whispers of servants, gaining details with each retelling. But the core remained the same. A man had found a disabled child left to die, and without hesitation had taken him home. In a world where such a gesture could be seen as weakness or foolishness, someone had chosen to be kind. Emma dismounted before the simple house she'd been directed to. It was smaller than her father's stables, but there was something welcoming in its clean lines and the smoke curling from the chimney. She could hear voices from inside, one of them clearly a child's. When she knocked, it took a few moments before the door opened. Emma had expected a servant, perhaps a housekeeper. Instead, she found herself face to face with the knight himself. Michael was taller than she had imagined, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of military training. But it was his eyes that surprised her, brown and warm, with a gentleness that contrasted with his strong bearing. He studied her for a moment, clearly surprised to find a noble lady at his door. "Lady Arkwright," he said, bowing his head respectfully. "It is an honor, Sir Michael." Emma felt her voice sound more formal than she intended. "I heard about the child you rescued. I wanted to meet him." Something in Michael's face shifted. The polite courtesy gave way to something more genuine. "He would love to meet you too. Please come in." The house was even simpler inside, but impeccably clean and organized. Emma immediately noticed the details that showed a child's presence: a small bowl on the table, a colorful blanket folded near the hearth, makeshift toys carved from wood. "Ethan," Michael called softly, "we have a visitor." The boy appeared, leaning on a crude crutch that Michael had obviously made for him. Emma's heart ached to see how small and frail he was, but there was something in his eyes that struck her. It wasn't self-pity or resignation. It was genuine curiosity and a spark of joy that seemed impossible given his circumstances. "Are you a princess?" Ethan asked, looking at Emma's fine dress with childish awe. Emma laughed, a natural sound that surprised her. It had been a long time since she had laughed like that, without calculating the effect. "No, just a lady. My name is Emma, and you must be Ethan." "Sir Michael told me about ladies," Ethan said, approaching carefully. "He said they are brave and kind." Emma glanced at Michael, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "He said that?" Michael flushed slightly. "Ethan asks a lot of questions. I try to answer them as best I can. And he always answers," Ethan added seriously, "even when he doesn't really know the answer." The childish honesty made Emma smile again. She moved closer and knelt beside Ethan, bringing herself to his level. "May I ask how you are feeling?" "Better," Ethan replied promptly. "Sir Michael makes very good broth, and he teaches me things about knights and honor, and why it's important to take care of people." Emma felt something shift inside her, like a door opening to a world she didn't know. She looked around the house again, this time noticing not its simplicity, but the care. The medicinal herbs drying near the window, the small stool Michael had built so Ethan could reach higher things, the way everything was arranged with the child's needs in mind. "You've done all this yourself?" she asked Michael. "Dame Margaret helped with the herbs and some medical advice," he admitted. "But yes, for the most part." There was a modesty in his answer that Emma found refreshing. She was used to men who boasted of far lesser accomplishments. Michael spoke of saving a life as if it were just another daily chore. "Why?" Emma asked, before she even realized she'd spoken the question aloud. Michael met her gaze directly. "Why what? Why did you do it? Why take on this responsibility?" He was silent for a moment, as if the question deserved a thoughtful answer. "Because no one else would, and because—" He hesitated, glancing at Ethan, who was now playing with one of the wooden toys. "Because everyone deserves to have someone who cares about them." The simplicity of the answer hit Emma like a physical blow. There was no political agenda, no expectation of reward, not even pride in his own kindness. There was only the fundamental belief that doing the right thing was enough. "My father will be impressed when I tell him about you," Emma said, and immediately regretted the words. They sounded condescending, as if her father's approval was what mattered. "I hope so," Michael replied politely, but Emma noticed something in his expression shut down. "Though I've done nothing any honorable man wouldn't do." The correction was gentle, but clear. He wasn't looking for approval or recognition. He was simply living by his principles. "Will you come back and visit us?" Ethan asked suddenly, looking at Emma with hope. Emma hesitated, aware of Michael watching for her response. I would like that very much. Is that a promise? The boy insisted. Emma looked at Michael, searching for some sign that she would be welcome. She found only quiet expectation and a slight nod. It's a promise, she said, and realized it was the first promise she'd made in a long time that she truly meant to keep. When she left Michael's house that afternoon, Emma felt as if she had discovered something she hadn't even known she was looking for. For the first time, she had seen a man who measured his own worth not by what he owned or conquered, but by the good he did when no one was watching. And that discovery would change everything, because Emma Arkwright had just realized she had spent her entire life surrounded by men who wanted to impress her, and now she had met one who simply wanted to be good. The difference was overwhelming. Emma's visits became a routine that neither she nor Michael dared to question. 3 times a week, she would appear at his door with baskets of food, medicinal herbs, or simply softer fabrics for Ethan's clothes. There was always a practical excuse, a charitable reason to justify her presence. They never admitted the real one, that they had both begun to long for these moments of genuine simplicity. "Lady Emma!" Ethan would shout every time he saw her arrive, his eyes lighting up in a way that made her heart ache. The boy had gained weight and color in the weeks since Michael had saved him, but more than that, he had gained confidence. He was learning to read with the knight's help and loved to show Emma his progress. "Look," Ethan said one autumn afternoon, proudly holding up a piece of parchment. "I wrote my full name." Emma studied the clumsy but determined letters. "Ethan of Hartfeld," she read aloud. "What a fine name." "Sir Michael said everyone needs a last name," Ethan explained seriously. "And since Hartfeld is my home now, this is mine." Emma glanced at Michael, who was preparing tea by the hearth. There was something touching in how he had given the boy not just a roof over his head, but an identity, a place in the world. "It's a very fitting name," Emma agreed, "and your handwriting is improving so much." Michael approached, carrying a tray with 3 cups of herbal tea. "He's been working very hard. He's an exceptional student." Emma noticed how Michael always made a point to praise Ethan, to highlight his progress and talents instead of his limitations. It was a constant, deliberate kindness that touched something deep in her heart. "May I ask you a personal question?" Emma said once Ethan had gone outside to play in the small back garden. Michael nodded, settling into the chair across from her. He had grown more relaxed in her presence over the weeks, though he still maintained the respectful courtesy his station required. "What made you become a knight? I mean, beyond the obligation of your lineage?" Michael was silent for a moment, looking out the window where they could see Ethan trying to build something with fallen twigs. "My father died in a war when I was 12. A war over a land dispute between 2 barons who barely knew the names of the men they sent to die for them." Emma felt her chest tighten. "I'm so sorry. I swore that if I ever had the power to protect people, I would never use it for my own interests, that I would only fight for just causes." He turned to look at her. "It sounds naive, doesn't it?" "It sounds honorable," Emma corrected softly, "and rare." There was something in the way she said it that made Michael truly look at her for the first time, not as Lady Arkwright, daughter of an important baron, but as Emma. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the way she leaned forward slightly when something truly interested her, the way her expression softened when she spoke to Ethan. "And you?" Michael asked. "What makes you happy, beyond the duties of your station?" Emma blinked, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked her that before. I don't think anyone has ever bothered to ask. I'm asking now." The simple statement struck her like a gentle blow. "Books," she said finally. "I love stories about faraway places and brave people. And music. I play the harp a little." "Ethan would love to hear it," Michael said with a smile. "He's been asking about music ever since he saw the minstrels at the Harvest Festival. I could bring my harp on my next visit. We would love that." There was something in the "we" that made Emma's heart quicken, as if she were part of something, as if her presence was wanted not out of social obligation, but out of genuine affection. "Sir Michael," she said impulsively, "may I ask you another question, a very personal one?" He nodded, though a cautiousness entered his eyes. "Do you ever feel lonely, living by yourself, taking care of Ethan, without a family of your own?" Michael grew very still. It was a question that touched on something he preferred not to examine too closely. "Ethan is my family now," he said finally. "But what about a wife? Children of your own?" "My station isn't exactly attractive for marriage proposals," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and I have no lands or fortune to offer." Emma felt something ignite inside her. "Any woman would be lucky to have you." The words were out before she could stop them, laden with more emotion than she had intended. They stared at each other for a long moment, aware that something had shifted in the air between them. "Lady Emma," Michael said softly, "you are very kind, but—" "No," Emma interrupted, standing abruptly. "Don't say I'm being kind. It's not kindness. It's honesty." Michael stood as well, suddenly very close to her. Emma could feel the warmth from his body, see the small scars on his hands from years of sword training. "Emma," he said, and the way he said her name, without the title, made something melt inside her. "You know this is impossible. Why? Because you are a baron's daughter. Because your future is already mapped out in political marriages and strategic alliances. Because I have nothing to offer but a simple home and an oath to protect those who need protecting." Emma took a step closer. "And what if that was all I wanted?" For a moment Michael seemed to waver. His eyes searched her face as if trying to memorize every detail. Then, as if remembering himself, he took a step back. "Your father would never allow it." "My father," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly, "doesn't have to know about my feelings." The word hung in the air between them like a confession. Feelings. It was no longer just admiration or curiosity. It was something deeper and far more dangerous. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was a painful resolve in them. "Emma, you deserve so much more than I could ever give you. Would you let me be the judge of that?" Before Michael could answer, Ethan came running back into the house, excited to show them what he had built. The moment was broken, but something fundamental had been acknowledged between them. As Emma feigned interest in Ethan's twig construction, she could feel Michael's eyes on her. She knew he was fighting the same feelings that tormented her. The difference was, she was tired of fighting. That night, as she rode home, Emma made a decision. She didn't know how she would make it work, didn't know how she would face her father or the expectations of her station. But she knew she had found something real and true, and she wasn't willing to give it up without a fight. Michael of Hartfeld was right. She did deserve more. She deserved someone who saw her not as a political pawn but as a woman, someone who would care for her with the same gentle determination he showed Ethan, someone who would love her for who she was, not what she represented. And as impossible as it seemed, she was determined to have exactly that. Baron Leonard Halden slammed his wine goblet down hard enough to send red liquid splashing across the polished oak table. His nostrils flared as he processed the words he had just heard from his informant. "How often?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "3 times a week, my lord," the man answered, a nervous merchant who had the unfortunate habit of always being in the right place to observe and report. "Sometimes more. The Lady Arkwright spends hours at the knight's home." Halden rose slowly, an imposing figure whose presence dominated any room he entered. He was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, whether through calculated charm or deliberate intimidation. The idea that Emma Arkwright, the woman he had chosen to be his wife, was regularly visiting the knight he despised was intolerable. "And what exactly does she do there?" Halden asked, beginning to pace the room like a caged predator. "Tends to the boy, mostly. Brings food, herbs, gifts, but—" The man hesitated. "But what?" "She stays a long time, my lord, and the servants say she always returns smiling." Halden stopped pacing abruptly. Emma's smile was something he had rarely witnessed, despite all his efforts to court her properly. During formal dinners at Arkwright Castle, she was polite, respectful, but distant, as if a part of her were always somewhere else. Now he knew where. "Leave us," Halden said to the informant, dismissing him with a silver coin. Once he was alone, he allowed the fury he'd been controlling to finally take shape. Michael of Hartfeld, the idealistic knight who had once publicly humiliated him in a military council by questioning a strategy Halden had proposed. The man who had the audacity to value honor above political pragmatism, and now apparently the man who was corrupting the woman who would be his wife. Halden was no fool. He knew Emma well enough to know she wasn't easily impressed by wealth or power, the very traits that usually attracted women of her station. She possessed an irritating streak of moral independence that he had always planned to mold after their marriage. But if she was developing an affection for another man— The door opened unceremoniously, and Sir Edmund Blackwater entered the room. Edmund was Halden's distant cousin and closest advisor, a man whose loyalty was bought and maintained through a share in the profits of the Baron's various dubious dealings. "You look troubled," Edmund observed, pouring himself some wine without waiting for an invitation. Emma Arkwright is behaving inappropriately, Halden said flatly. Ah. Edmund settled into a chair, clearly intrigued. And how precisely? Halden relayed what he had discovered, watching as Edmund's face lit up with malicious possibilities. It was one of the reasons he liked his cousin. Edmund instinctively understood how to turn information into an advantage. The savior knight, Edmund mused. Interesting. And what sort of man is this Michael of Hartfeld? The worst kind, Halden answered bitterly. Honorable, principled, the kind that makes other people feel diminished simply by existing. Edmund chuckled softly. Then he's exactly the type of man a romantic young woman would find irresistible. Emma is not just any romantic young woman. She is my future wife, and she will remain so if we manage this situation properly. Edmund leaned forward, his eyes glinting. The question is, how do you discredit a man whose reputation is built entirely on his virtue? Halden moved to the window, gazing out at his sprawling lands. Every acre had been gained through strategic marriages, calculated purchases, and, when necessary, subtle intimidation. He hadn't gotten where he was by being passive in the face of obstacles. The boy, he said suddenly. I'm sorry. The child he rescued. That's his weak point. Halden turned, a cold smile forming on his lips. Men like Michael have a compulsive need to save the downtrodden. It's their strength and their weakness. Edmund nodded slowly, beginning to understand. And if something were to happen to the child? Nothing will happen to him, Halden said quickly. We are not monsters, Edmund, but there are other ways to remove an obstacle. The law, Edmund said, catching on. The boy was abandoned. Technically, Michael has no legal right to keep him. Exactly. And I have enough connections to ensure that the proper authorities are informed of the situation. Edmund drained his goblet, clearly pleased. You want me to handle it? No. I want you to find out everything you can about the child's family. Where he came from, why he was abandoned, if there are any relatives who might claim guardianship. Halden paused, considering. And I want you to be very, very discreet. As Edmund left to carry out his instructions, Halden turned his attention to the larger problem, how to drive Emma away from the knight without appearing to be the villain. She needed to see for herself that Michael was inadequate, that his apparent kindness was actually weakness in disguise. 3 days later, the opportunity presented itself in the form of a formal dinner at Arkwright Castle. Halden had been invited, as was custom, and Emma would be in attendance. It was the perfect chance to plant the seeds of doubt. The evening was cold as Emma descended into the main hall, wearing a deep blue gown that brought out her eyes. Halden noted immediately that she seemed more vibrant than usual, an observation that made his jaw tighten. Lady Emma, he said, kissing her hand politely as she approached, you are radiant tonight. Thank you, Sir Leonard, she replied, her courtesy flawless but distant. During dinner, Halden waited patiently for the right opening. It came when Baron Arkwright casually mentioned the latest happenings in the village. I hear there's a knight in Hartfeld who has taken in an orphan child, Arkwright commented. A noble gesture, though perhaps a reckless one. Halden saw Emma straighten slightly in her chair, her attention fully captured. Reckless how, father? She asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Well, Halden said, inserting himself into the conversation as if the thought were spontaneous. Caring for a child with limitations is an enormous responsibility, especially for a single man with no considerable means. Emma looked at him directly. Are you familiar with the situation, Sir Leonard? Only by hearsay, Halden lied smoothly. But it concerns me that the knight may be acting more from the heart than from prudence. What will happen to the child if he can no longer provide adequate care? Sir Michael is perfectly capable of caring for Ethan, Emma said, her defense sharper than she intended. Halden noted how she used the knight's first name, the familiarity telling. I'm sure he has the best of intentions, but intentions are not enough when it comes to the well-being of a vulnerable child. And what would you suggest? Emma asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Perhaps the child would be better off in a proper institution, or with a family that can offer long-term stability. Halden paused, letting the words sink in. Sometimes, true love means letting go. Emma was silent for the rest of the dinner, but Halden could see that his words had found their mark. He had planted the seed of doubt, the question that would eat away at her confidence in the knight. Was it truly best for Ethan to stay with Michael, or was Emma allowing her personal feelings to cloud her judgment? When she excused herself early, pleading fatigue, Halden smiled to himself. The first blow had been struck. Now it was just a matter of time and carefully applied pressure. Michael of Hartfeld might be honourable and virtuous, but Halden had learned long ago that even the most principled men had a breaking point, and he was determined to find Michael's. The war for the soul of Emma Arkwright had begun. Emma couldn't sleep that night. Halden's words echoed in her mind like a death knell, each repetition raising new fears she didn't know how to face. Sometimes, true love means letting go. The phrase haunted her because it held a cruel truth that Emma couldn't deny. For the first time since she'd met Ethan, she allowed herself to question whether her visits were truly for the boy's good or for her own feelings. Was she being selfish? Was she putting Ethan at risk by creating a situation that could explode into scandal? The next morning, she rode to Hartfeld with a heavy heart. She found Michael in the garden, teaching Ethan how to identify medicinal herbs. The boy was beaming, pointing to each plant and proudly reciting its properties. "Lady Emma!" Ethan cried upon seeing her, running toward her with the renewed energy he had gained under Michael's care. "Come see, I learned about chamomile and mint and—" "That's wonderful, my dear," Emma said, forcing a smile as she hugged the boy. But when she looked over his head at Michael, she saw something in his eyes that gave her pause. It was concern, but there was something else. Guilt. "Can we talk?" she asked once Ethan had returned his focus to the plants. Michael nodded, leading her inside the house. There was a tension between them that hadn't been there before, as if they were both aware that something fundamental had changed. "You seem troubled," Michael said, gesturing to a chair. "Did something happen?" Emma sat, struggling to find the right words. "Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need your complete honesty." Something in her tone made him straighten. "Of course. Do you think you're doing what's best for Ethan? I mean truly what's best, not just what feels right." The question hit him like a punch. Michael was silent for a long moment, processing not just the words, but the pain he saw in Emma's eyes. "Did someone say something to you?" he asked finally. "Please, just answer the question." Michael stood and walked to the window, looking out at Ethan still in the garden. "I do the best I can. He's healthier, happier, he's learning. But can you give him everything he needs, a proper education, medical care when he's older, a secure future?" Each word was like a blade, cutting because Michael had already asked himself these same questions countless times. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "Then why are you doing this?" Michael turned to face her, and she saw the raw vulnerability in his face. "Because when I found him on that road dying, abandoned like he was trash, I saw myself. I saw the boy I was when my father died, and there was no one who truly cared whether I lived or died." The brutal honesty of the answer struck her like a physical blow. "Michael, I know I'm not the ideal choice for him," Michael continued, his voice growing steadier. "I know I don't have wealth or connections or all the advantages a noble family could offer, but I have love. I have an absolute dedication to his well-being, and I have the promise that I will never, ever abandon him." "But what if love isn't enough?" Emma whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The question hung in the air between them like an accusation. Michael stared at her for a long moment, something in his expression breaking. "Do you think I should give him to another family?" Emma couldn't answer right away. Part of her wanted to scream no, to say that what he was doing was perfect and noble, and exactly what Ethan needed. But the doubts Halden had planted had taken root, and she could no longer ignore them. "I don't know," she said finally, and she saw how the words wounded him. They fell silent, the weight of their doubts filling the space between them. Just then, Ethan came into the house, carrying a handful of wildflowers. "For you, Lady Emma," he said, offering the flowers with a radiant smile. "So Michael taught me that knights should always be kind to ladies." Emma took the flowers, feeling her heart break. How could she question whether this boy was better off here, in this simple home filled with love, than anywhere else? "They're beautiful," she said, kissing Ethan's forehead. "Thank you." "Are you staying for dinner?" Ethan asked hopefully. Emma looked at Michael, seeing the silent plea in his eyes. But she also saw resignation, as if he already knew something had irrevocably changed between them. "I can't today," she said softly, "but I'll be back soon. Promise?" "I promise." But as she left the house, Emma was no longer sure if she could keep that promise. Halden's words had poisoned something pure inside her, creating doubt where there had once been only certainty. That night, alone in her chambers, Emma cried for the first time in years. She cried for the cruelty of a world that forced impossible choices between love and duty, between what the heart wanted and what reason dictated. Michael, for his part, spent the night awake, watching Ethan sleep and wondering if Emma was right. If his love for the child was enough, or if he was being selfish by keeping him when there might be better alternatives. This was exactly what Halden had been counting on. He didn't need to tear Michael and Emma apart by force. He just had to make them tear themselves apart, eaten away by the doubts he had planted. And for the first time since he had rescued Ethan, Michael began to wonder if doing what felt right was really the same as doing what was best. The seed of destruction had been planted, and it was beginning to grow. 3 days passed without a visit from Emma. Michael tried to keep his routine with Ethan, but her absence was an open wound he couldn't ignore. The boy asked about her constantly, his eyes scanning the window every time he heard the sound of hooves on the road. "Is she all right?" Ethan asked on the 3rd morning, his voice small and worried. "Is Lady Emma sick?" "She's fine," Michael said, hating how the lie sounded false even to his own ears. Just busy with duties at home, but Michael knew that wasn't it. He knew his words about not being sure he could give Ethan everything he needed had created a rift between them that might not be repairable. That was when Sir Edmund Blackwater appeared at his door. Michael knew Edmund by sight, but they had never spoken directly. The man had the polished look of a courtier, but there was something in his eyes that put Michael on immediate alert. "Sir Michael," Edmund said with exaggerated politeness, "may I come in? I have an official matter to discuss with you." Michael hesitated but couldn't refuse a formal request without cause. "Of course. Ethan, could you go play in the garden?" Once they were alone, Edmund settled in without an invitation, his eyes scanning the simple house with poorly disguised disdain. "I have come at the request of the district magistrate," Edmund said, pulling a scroll from his tunic. "There are questions regarding the guardianship of the child you are housing." Michael felt his blood run cold. "What kind of questions?" "Well, you've taken responsibility for a child without proper legal authority. The boy was abandoned, yes, but there are protocols to be followed, investigations to be made." "Investigations into what?" Edmund smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Into whether you are a suitable guardian, whether you can provide appropriate care, whether there are any relatives who might have a legal claim to him." Michael rose slowly, every military instinct he possessed screaming that he was under attack. "And who requested this investigation?" "Concerned citizens, people who believe the child's welfare may be at risk." "Which citizens?" "That's confidential, of course." Edmund stood as well, clearly pleased with the effect of his words. "But I can tell you there are specific concerns about your ability to provide a proper education, specialized medical care for the child's limitations, and long-term financial stability." Michael felt the trap closing around him. They were the exact same concerns Emma had voiced days ago. "And if I refuse to cooperate with this investigation, then the child will be removed from your custody immediately and placed in a suitable institution while a proper guardian is determined." Edmund paused, savoring the moment. "I understand that would be traumatic and for you both." Michael clenched his fists, fighting the urge to grab Edmund by the collar and throw him out, but he knew that would only confirm any claim that he was an unfit guardian. "What do you want?" "Only cooperation, a show of good faith that you are willing to work within the proper legal channels." Edmund moved to the door, then stopped. "Oh, and it might be wise to discourage certain visits that could complicate matters. Inappropriate relationships could reflect poorly on your suitability assessment." The meaning was clear. Stay away from Emma, or lose Ethan. After Edmund left, Michael sat heavily in his chair, his head in his hands. He had been a fool to think he could simply rescue Ethan and live in peace. In a world ruled by politics and power, even acts of kindness could be turned into weapons. Ethan appeared at the back door, still holding the flowers he had picked. "Sir Michael, are you okay?" Michael forced a smile. "I'm fine, my boy." "Who was that man?" Michael hesitated. How could he explain to a child that there were people in the world who would use his own vulnerability against him? "Just someone with questions about our family." "Our family?" "Yes." Michael knelt to Ethan's level, placing his hands on the boy's small shoulders. "Listen, Ethan. No matter what happens, you need to know that I love you, that you are important, that you deserve to be happy and safe." Ethan tilted his head, confused by the sudden seriousness. "Is something bad going to happen?" "I don't know. But if it does, I want you to remember this. You are not a burden. You are not a mistake. You are a gift, and any family would be lucky to have you." That afternoon, Emma finally returned. Michael saw her approaching and felt his heart split between relief and despair. She was coming to them just when he needed her most, and just when it was perhaps most dangerous for everyone involved. "Emma," he said, as she dismounted, using her first name without a title. She looked at him, and Michael saw something different in her expression, determination where there had once been doubt. "I need to talk to you," she said, "about what we discussed a few days ago, about my concerns." "Emma, before you say anything, I need to tell you what happened today." He recounted Edmund's visit, watching as Emma's face grew paler and paler. By the time he finished, she was trembling with rage. "They can't do that," she said, her voice low but fierce. "They can't just—" "They can," Michael said calmly, "and they will if we're not careful." Emma moved toward him, her eyes burning with a resolve he had never seen before. "Then we'll be smarter than them." "Emma, no. Listen to me." She took his hands, not caring who might see. "I have spent 3 days torturing myself with doubts that other people planted in my mind. 3 days questioning if you were doing the right thing, if I was being selfish, if Ethan would be better off somewhere else. And what was your conclusion? That they are trying to destroy us by using our own consciences against us." Her voice was firm now, filled with a resolution Michael hadn't expected. "And I am not going to let that happen." Michael felt something ignite inside him, a hope he had almost lost. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if they want a fight, they're going to get one. I'm saying you are the best man I know, and Ethan is lucky to have you. And I'm saying that if we love each other, we need to fight for it." The words hung in the air between them. Love. She had said it aloud, finally admitting what they had both known for weeks. "Emma," Michael said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "do you know what you're risking?" "I know exactly what I'm risking, and I know it's worth it." In that moment, with Ethan playing in the garden and an uncertain future before them, Michael made a decision. If they were going to try to destroy him, he would at least fight alongside the woman he loved. The war Halden had started was about to escalate. But now he would be facing not just an idealistic knight, but a woman determined to protect the family she had chosen, and that changed everything. The confrontation that would change everything began on a grey November morning, when Baron Arkwright summoned Emma to a private meeting in his study. She knew from her father's grim expression that her visits to Michael had not gone unnoticed for much longer. "Sit down," Arkwright said, his voice more formal than he usually used with her. Papers were spread across his desk, and Emma noticed Halden's seal on several of them. "Father," Emma began, trying to keep her voice steady, This is about Sir Leonard Halden coming to me last night," Arkwright interrupted, "with very serious allegations concerning your behavior." Emma felt her blood run cold, but forced herself to remain calm. "What kind of allegations?" "That you have been regularly visiting a knight of low standing, that you have developed inappropriate feelings for him, that you have behaved in a way that compromises not only your reputation, but potentially our marriage agreement." Each word was delivered with clinical precision, as if Arkwright were reading a sentence. Emma felt anger rise within her, but she knew she had to be strategic. "And you believe him?" Arkwright studied her for a long moment. "I believe there is a kernel of truth to his concerns, yes. Emma, you have been visiting this knight regularly, without a proper chaperone, in a situation anyone could misconstrue." "I was tending to an orphan child," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "A child who was saved by an honorable man when his own father left him to die. And that is admirable. But your motives for these visits have changed, haven't they? It's no longer just about the child." The direct question caught her off guard. Emma looked at her father's face, seeing not just authority, but genuine concern. And in that moment, she made a decision that would alter her life forever. "No," she said clearly, "it's not just about Ethan. I love Michael of Hartfeld." The silence that followed was deafening. Arkwright leaned back in his chair, as if she had physically struck him. "Emma, I love him, father, and he loves me. And for the first time in my life, I have found someone who sees me not as a political pawn or a strategic alliance, but as a person." "You are my daughter," Arkwright said, his voice tense. "You have obligations, responsibilities, and I accept them, but I will not be forced to marry a man I see as an adversary for reasons that benefit only political ambition." Arkwright stood, walking to the window. "Halden offers stability, security, a prosperous future for you and for our family. Halden offers power, for you and for him. I am just the means to achieve it." "And the knight? What does he offer? A humble home, a life of hardship, the burden of caring for a child who isn't even his?" Emma rose as well, her own resolve hardening. "He offers true love, genuine honor, the chance to be part of something greater than my own privilege." "Emma, be sensible. Passions fade. Romantic love doesn't sustain a household or protect against life's hardships. But mutual respect does, and Michael respects me, Father. He values my opinions, trusts my judgment, sees strength where others see only a decorative ornament. Arkwright turned to face her, and Emma saw something that surprised her. Sadness. Do you truly believe you can be happy living in such reduced circumstances? I believe I can be happy beside a man who loves me for who I am, not what I represent. I believe I can find purpose in helping people who truly need it, rather than simply managing estates and attending social functions. And Ethan? The child will always be a burden between you. Emma smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Ethan is not a burden. He is a gift, a chance to make a difference in the life of someone who needs it most. Arkwright returned to his desk, shuffling Halden's papers. Sir Leonard will not take this lying down. He has invested considerable time and resources into this arrangement, and he has enough influence to make life difficult for all of us. Then so be it. I would rather face hardship fighting for something I believe in than live a comfortable life built on lies. There was a long pause. Then Arkwright sighed deeply. Do you understand that if you choose this path, there is no turning back? That society will judge you harshly? That other suitors of similar standing will never consider you? I understand, and I accept the consequences of my choice. Arkwright studied her for a long moment, and Emma saw something shift in his expression, as if he were seeing her, truly for the first time, as an adult woman capable of making her own decisions. There is something I must confess, he said finally. I have never entirely liked Halden. He is a capable man, but there is a cruelty in him that has always troubled me. I just thought he was the best I could do for you. The admission took her by surprise. Father, perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps what is best for you is exactly what you have chosen. He came around the desk and took her hands. If this Michael of Hartfeld is truly the man you believe him to be, then perhaps we should get to know him better. Emma felt tears of relief sting her eyes. You want to meet him. I want to judge for myself if he is worthy of the extraordinary woman my daughter has become. In that moment, Emma knew she had won the first battle, but she also knew that Halden would not give up easily, and that the real war was just beginning. There is one more thing, Arkwright said. Halden mentioned legal issues regarding the child's guardianship. He said there are investigations underway. Emma felt the anger return. He is using Ethan as a weapon against us. Then we will have to be smarter than he is. Arkwright returned to his desk and picked up a quill. Fortunately, I have some influence in legal matters as well. And unlike Halden, I intend to use it to protect a child, not to harm one. Emma hugged her father, feeling an immense weight lift from her shoulders. Thank you for trusting me. Just promise me one thing, Arkwright said, pulling back to look her in the eye. Promise me you have thought this through, that you are not being moved by simple rebellion or youthful romance. I promise I have never been more certain of anything in my life. 2 hours later, Emma rode to Hartfeld with a heart lighter than it had felt in weeks. She found Michael in the garden, teaching Ethan how to whittle wood. The boy was concentrating, his tongue sticking out in determination as Michael patiently guided his small hands. Lady Emma! Ethan cried when he saw her, abandoning his project and running to hug her. Look what I'm making. I'm going to make a wooden horse. It's beautiful, Emma said, kissing the top of his head. You're becoming very skilled. Michael approached, his eyes searching her face for any sign of her mood. How was the meeting with your father? Better than I expected, much better. Emma smiled, feeling how good it was to be completely honest. I told him about us, about my feelings. Michael stopped breathing for a moment. And he wants to meet you, officially. The relief on Michael's face was like watching the sun rise after a long night. Emma, are you sure? Do you know what this means? It means I'm choosing you. We are choosing each other. Michael moved closer, taking her hands with the gentleness of someone holding something precious. And Halden? He won't accept this quietly. My father will deal with Halden, and with the legal issues concerning Ethan. Emma squeezed his hands. Michael, for the first time we are not fighting alone. Ethan appeared beside them, looking from one to the other with curiosity. Are you going to get married? He asked with the frankness of a child. Emma and Michael looked at each other, both blushing slightly. Would you like that? Emma asked. Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. Then you would be my real mother, and we would be a real family. Emma knelt to his level, touching his face gently. Ethan, you know I already love you as if you were my own son, don't you? The boy nodded, his eyes shining. And I love you like a mother, even if you are an important lady. I am no more important than you are, Emma said firmly. Never. We are equally important, equally loved. Michael watched the interaction between them, feeling his heart expand. He had dreamed of moments like this, but had never dared to believe they could become real. "So this is it?" he asked when Emma stood up. "We're really doing this. We're really doing this." Michael pulled her into his arms then, kissing her for the first time. It was a soft kiss, full of promise and tenderness, witnessed only by a boy who was clapping excitedly, and the trees that swayed in the autumn wind. When they parted, Emma rested her forehead against his. "Michael?" "Yes? Whatever Halden tries to do, we will face it together. As a family." "As a family," he agreed, knowing he had found not just the love of his life, but his true home. Ethan squeezed between them, hugging them both tightly. "This is the best family ever," he declared with authority. And for the first time since this all began, Michael believed that maybe, just maybe, love really could be enough to conquer any adversity they faced. The sun was setting over Hartfeld, painting the sky in gold and rose as the three of them headed inside. It was the end of a day that had changed everything, and the beginning of a life they would build together, no matter what came next. The storm Halden would still try to bring was approaching, but they would face it as one, as a family that had chosen love above all conventions and obstacles, and that would make all the difference. The council room at Arkwright Castle had never seen a meeting quite like this one. On one side sat Baron Leonard Halden, flanked by Sir Edmund and two legal aides he had brought for the occasion. On the other, Baron Arkwright with Emma at his side and Michael standing behind them, his military posture impeccable despite the obvious tension. Ethan was in the care of Dame Margaret, at Emma's insistence. "A child shouldn't have to witness adults fighting over his future," she had said, and Michael had agreed completely. "Sir Leonard," Arkwright began with cool civility, "I appreciate you coming to discuss this matter civilly." Halden smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, Baron Arkwright, though I must say I am surprised by the presence of the knight in question. Sir Michael is here because he has a right to defend his case. You are, after all, questioning his fitness as a guardian." "I am questioning far more than that," Halden said, his mask of civility beginning to slip. "I am questioning the wisdom of allowing inappropriate relationships to influence decisions affecting the welfare of a vulnerable child." Emma stood, her back straight and her voice firm. "Sir Leonard, I would like you to clarify exactly what you mean by inappropriate relationships." Halden met her gaze directly. "You know exactly what I mean, Lady Emma. Your constant visits to this knight, your obvious affection for him, your refusal to honor our marriage agreement, all of it creates an atmosphere of scandal that cannot be beneficial for an impressionable child." "And what creates scandal," Emma said, her voice gaining strength, "is the suggestion that caring for an orphan child is something shameful. What creates scandal is trying to use a vulnerable child as a pawn in your political games." "Emma," Michael said softly, touching her shoulder. She looked at him and saw a calm resolve in his eyes. "Let me speak for myself." Michael stepped forward, facing Halden directly. "Sir Leonard, you question my fitness as Ethan's guardian. What specific evidence do you have that I am failing in my duty to him?" "Evidence," Halden scoffed. "You have no resources to educate him properly, no connections to secure his future, no legal standing to even keep him." "As for his education," Michael said calmly, "Ethan is learning to read and write. He is studying history, basic herbalism, and the principles of honor and compassion. As for resources, I have enough to keep him fed, clothed, and sheltered. And as for legal standing," Arkwright stood, pulling a document from his tunic, "that can be easily remedied. I am prepared to formally recognize Sir Michael as Ethan's legal guardian under my authority as Baron of this region." Halden's face contorted with rage. "You can't." "I can and I will," Arkwright said firmly. "I have full authority over matters of guardianship on my lands, and after speaking at length with Sir Michael, I am convinced Ethan could not be in better hands." Edmund leaned in to whisper something in Halden's ear, who nodded sharply. "Very well," Halden said, his voice dangerously low. "If you insist on protecting this charade, then let us speak plainly. Emma, you are ending our betrothal for this?" He gestured dismissively toward Michael. "I am ending our betrothal because I have chosen to marry for love, not for political convenience." "Love," Halden repeated, as if the word were poison in his mouth. "For a landless, fortuneless knight, saddled with a disabled child?" "For a man," Emma said, rising and moving to stand beside Michael, "who saved a life when it would have been easier to do nothing. For a man who defines moral worth not by what he owns, but by the good he does. For a man who loves me for who I am, not what I represent. Michael took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Sir Leonard, he said, I understand your frustration, but Emma has made her choice freely, and I will not apologize for loving her. Halden shot to his feet, his composure finally breaking completely. You think you've won? You think you can humiliate me like this and simply walk away? Leonard, Arkwright said in a warning tone, I suggest you maintain your composure. Composure? Halden shouted. I have invested years in this arrangement. I have made promises based on it. And now you tell me it's all for nothing because she's fallen for choose your next words carefully, Michael said, his own voice growing dangerous. For a naive idealist who thinks kindness is enough in the real world, Halden finished. Emma stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. And what does that say about you, Sir Leonard? That you see kindness as a weakness? That you despise compassion? That you would prefer a world where power matters more than character? I prefer a world that works, Halden retorted. Then you are going to be very disappointed, Arkwright said dryly, because this world, at least this small corner of it, is going to work based on different principles. Halden looked around the room, finally realizing he had lost completely. His influence, his connections, his wealth, none of it mattered here in this moment against the resolve of people who had chosen what was right over what was convenient. This isn't over, he said, turning for the door. You will find there are consequences for defying men like me. Sir Leonard, Michael said, stopping him at the door, I sincerely hope you find the peace you are so obviously searching for. But if you ever try to harm my family in any way, you will find there is more than one way to be strong. Halden stared at him for a long moment, then left without another word, Edmund scurrying after him. When the door closed, Emma turned into Michael's arms, finally letting tears of relief fall. Is it over? She whispered. The hard part is over, Michael said, kissing her hair. Now we get to start the good part. Arkwright approached, extending a hand to Michael. Welcome to the family, Sir Michael. Officially this time. Michael shook his hand, feeling the weight of acceptance and responsibility. Thank you for trusting me, my lord. I won't disappoint you. You already haven't. You've taken care of my daughter and your son. That's more than most men can manage. They returned to Hartfeld at dusk, where they found Ethan waiting anxiously in the garden with Dame Margaret. The boy ran to them the moment they dismounted. Do I get to stay? He asked, his eyes wide with hope and fear. Forever, Emma said, kneeling to hug him. We're going to stay together forever. Like a real family? Like a real family, Michael confirmed, joining the embrace. Dame Margaret watched with tears in her eyes. I've never seen three people more suited to one another, she murmured. That night, after Ethan was in bed, Emma and Michael sat before the hearth, planning their future. There would be a simple wedding, they decided. A ceremony that celebrated genuine love instead of political alliances. Are you sure you won't regret this? Michael asked, still hardly believing his luck. The only thing I regret, Emma said, snuggling against him, is taking so long to admit that I love you. And I love you, Michael said, kissing her forehead. You two are the greatest gift life has ever given me. Outside, the wind rustled the trees of Hartfeld, but inside the small home filled with love, three people had found their place in the world. They had proven that sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing is truly rewarded. And that love, when it is real and true, can conquer even the most intimidating odds. Ethan slept peacefully in his bed, dreaming of wooden horses and families that choose to stay together. Emma and Michael planned a life built on solid principles and genuine affection. And somewhere in the distance, Halden rode home alone, carrying only his bitterness and the painful lesson that not everything can be bought or bullied into submission. Justice had prevailed, love had triumphed, and a family had been born not of blood or duty, but of the conscious choice to care for one another. It was exactly as it should be. End of story. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine writing it, hit that like button and share in the comments which moment moved you the most. Stories about true love, moral courage, and chosen families always deserve to be celebrated. May we all find our own version of Hartfeld, where what truly matters is valued above all else. Subscribe for more narratives that explore the best of human nature.